Okay, good evening, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. May peace be upon you all. So good evening, everyone. So good evening for Dr. Craig J. Selby for coming today. Thank you for being available for today's events, for today's workshop or webinars. Hello, how's it going?
Hi, good, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Lovely to meet some new faces here as well.
Right, thank you very much. So I usually call my students or my clients with guys, to be more a little bit friendly and chill. So guys, today we're gonna have this webinar called Tips and Strategies on How to Find the Right Supervisor for a PhD students. For your information, Dr. Craig, that today's participants, we are coming from different backgrounds for different profession. So there are many lecturers, many researchers, some of them also come from different background for their education. I mean, for their bachelor and master's degree. Some of them coming from education, some of them coming from accounting, finance, economics, pharmacy, medical students, health, safety, and so on and so forth. So in this session, we hope that they can get a little bit idea on how to find a supervisor, because as we all know together, the most difficult part of being a PhD student, to have the process of all those long process is to get the right supervisor. And because we know that probably you are we can say the expert on this, that's why we invite you to share some tips and strategies for this problem, for this issue. Okay, so everyone, you can feel free to ask Dr. Craig any questions through the chat box. Make sure that you mute your microphone and you can raise your hand whenever you want to directly having conversation and directly having chat with Dr. Craig at the end of our session. Before we start, this is the kind of the terms and condition of this webinar. I will read first about Dr. Craig profile first, so you will know a little bit, you will have a little idea about who is Dr. Craig J. Selby. Dr. Craig is a qualitative and historic researcher. He has been involved in tertiary education and management since 1993 and has lectured and supervised research students at universities and polytechnics in several Asia-Pacific countries. He is multidisciplinary in outlook. His undergraduate degree in socioeconomic geography, master's in economic development, and doctoral degree in economics and globalization. He holds additional postgraduate qualification in tertiary teaching and learning and has a keen interest in educational management and facilitation development. He is the principal and co-founder of the Third Degree, an academic resource platform for postgraduate students, and is now devoted to providing solutions to help empower research students. Craig teach qualitative research skills as well as dissertation writing to a global audience, and in 2022, he will be coordinating and facilitating a postgraduate diploma in education and innovation for a university in Pune in India. Wow, cool. This is a new information for me, new news for me. Craig also co-founded.
This week's happening.
Craig also co-founded Orchon Consulting Asia, a branding and communications agency headquartered in Kuala Lumpur. At Orchon, he represents local and regional clients in services, property, education, as well as conducting C-suite training in crisis communications, change management, and stakeholder outreach development. So I believe today we're going to have a lot of new knowledge and insights from you, as your background is quite rich. So without further ado, well, basically everyone, before we literally start, probably some of you have no idea what is TransforMe. So we actually collaborate with the Third Degree the platform, education platform that I just mentioned, co-founded by Dr. Craig. So we basically work together. TransforMe is an education platform. We aim to help many professional development. So in the future, we hope that we can build more professional development program, and we enter the market through the scholarship market, because we know there are tons of scholarship that can provide many programs for bachelor's, for master's, and for a doctoral degree. Okay, so that's a little idea about what is TransforMe. So without further ado, Dr. Craig,
Great, thank you very
yours
much.
now.
Great, let me put up my screen. There we go.
Yep.
And hopefully that's spot on for everybody. So welcome and thank you very much for the kind introduction. Great to see so many people here tonight, and great to see such a diversity as well. So people from different faculties and different subjects, and of course different interests. Tonight I'm going to talk about things that we can do to find the right supervisor or supervisors. We can have more than one when we're looking at our PhD. And I'm going to go through a range of thoughts and a range of ideas to help you think about who you should be choosing to get married to for the coming 3 to 5 years. And I call it marriage because you have to work very closely with these people, and you have to be comfortable with people at the same time. So it's very important. So I appreciate the sort of the nice overview introduction to myself. I'm a New Zealander. I've been living in Asia since my late teenage years, having lived in China, Macau, Malaysia. I've been 17 years in Malaysia. I do research primarily, or at least the past, primarily on Singapore. I'm a historic and qualitative researcher. I do not like numbers, but that doesn't mean I can't work with them. My interests are in Southeast Asian business and development, in education management, especially McDonaldization and the gigification of university systems. And also from a professional standpoint, what I do with my business partner, Farrell, who's in the room, at Orkin, is crisis communications and stakeholder outreach. I'm the co-founder of Third Degree, and I primarily train students in research methodology. I should refine that, in qualitative research methodology, and also in research communication. Do feel free to connect to me on LinkedIn. I think that's the best place to find me. And I also put up quite a lot of posts related to different aspects of the PhD journey and what you can do to help yourself along that journey, but also to become a stronger researcher. And for me, that's the most important thing, is developing our skills as a researcher so that we can improve lives from the research that we do. So I want to start off tonight by really getting into the thick of things. And you're probably not going to hear a lot of people in Indonesia tell you this, but you'll certainly hear it from me. It is your PhD, you need to drive it. So I look at it this way, and I have several Indonesian counterparts who are lecturers, heads of school, deans of faculty, and they do agree with me on this as well. But the key point I want to make is, regardless what your university says, you are the paying customer. Therefore, your PhD, you need to choose everything to benefit you. Don't get caught in, a trap where you accept less than adequate because your university is dictating to you. Everything at the end of the day has to come down to meeting your needs. So I say that, first of all, you call the shots. with your supervisor, with your topics, with the support that you need, and also with all of the key decisions. Now, your supervisors, the university you're enrolled at, they are there to support you. They are there to guide you. But you must be the one who drives the process. You cannot expect anybody else to do that. And that starts today. That starts with choosing your university, choosing the supervisor or supervisors that you want to work with, and making sure that you are confident in them as much as they are confident in you. Now, choosing wisely in terms of a supervisor really will help ensure a strong understanding and a development of really positive working relationships. And these will help you progress. I know lots of PhD students who chose unwisely. Supervisors who are difficult to get hold of, supervisors who don't give the type of feedback required. And really, this comes down to early on, before you formally enroll, setting or discussing first, setting expectations, agreeing upon what they're going to be, so that everybody wins. I'll make a statement in the sense that no supervisor wants their students to fail. The supervisor look bad, okay? But at the end of the day, they are not kindergarten teachers. They are not chasing you around the playground, making sure that you don't trip up. You have to look after yourself. But you need to have that early negotiation. And what I want to talk about tonight is, look, how do we choose the right people to be on our team, our support team, so that we have the best chance of actually really doing a fantastic job of our PhD. So my advice is, know what you want before you start, before you approach people, but also know why you are doing your PhD. That to me is also very important to think about. Now, there's going to be a trade-off sometimes. When we try to enroll for our PhD, are we looking at the university or are we looking at the personality, which is basically the supervisor? Because very seldom will you get a fantastic university of your dreams and the supervisor of your dreams at that same university, and they want you as your student. So there's always going to be a little bit of a trade-off, but you've got to be able to determine where's your priority lie. Is it the university? Are you looking after, a big name university? For example, University of Indonesia. Are we wanting to go there? Are we quite happy to go for, say, a smaller university or a private university because we're going to get the right people that work for us? If it's the supervisor you're after, you don't really mind which university, but you're really looking for a particular specialist that is going to help you to lift off or to take off, then, that's also perfectly fine. But you have to know what that trade-off is going to be. And most importantly, you need to be honest with yourself. What are your priorities? What are your decision factors? And what are you prepared to compromise on? So when I started my PhD journey, and it was a long journey, let's just say, it took a while, and I changed universities a few times. I actually looked for people. I wanted to work with supervisors who were well established within their field. I didn't care where the university was, as long as it was accessible for me. What I cared about was my supervisor was well known in the field, and that was both beneficial to me in the long run, but it also was, a part of the pride, because a good quality supervisor will work at a good quality university and is more likely to help me through the journey. Now, in some cases, this is sort of assuming that we get that particular choice. Some universities, because of equality and equity purposes, try to assign a supervisor rather than let you choose. Now, this, in our academic world, this is acceptable, but it may not be in your best interests, or more importantly, the best interests of your research. So, if it's the case for you, just be sure that you're comfortable with the supervisor or second supervisor that you've been assigned with. Maybe you can source for an external supervisor to be part of the secondary panel or panel of supervisors. And if so, make sure you know what the parameters are. Now, this comes down to your university policy. So if you're fixated with going to a university that's close to you or convenient for you, you've gone in and they're saying, look, I'll assign you this person. Just check their policy first, because what you don't want is to be caught in a position that makes it very difficult for your research. Now, in my early days, my early journey, I had a fantastic primary supervisor. He was actually the pro-vice chancellor of the university, which really helped for me. But he wanted my second supervisor to be an academic from another campus. The problem is I didn't like her. I didn't respect her work. I didn't like her personality. And in fact, because of that, I gave up with that university and moved elsewhere altogether. So, these people have impacts on our lives, and we've got to make sure that we know what we're comfortable with. So make sure you're comfortable and then proceed with that. Don't wait and say, oh, I'll give it a year, because when you've given it a year, that year is your research proposal. That year is 3 chapters of your PhD in reality sometimes. When we have that situation, we're too far in and it's really difficult to change after that. Now, choosing the right supervisor is important simply because, one, their guidance, their support, and eventually the recommendations they give can either make or break your PhD and your subsequent postdoc opportunities. It's really choosing now to make sure you have the best opportunities for the future beyond your PhD. Choosing your supervisor is actually possibly the biggest step in the whole academic career. So it's not one that should be rushed. Treat it like a job, but you are the hiring manager. You should be interviewing them to make sure they suit what you want. So my advice is very simple. Shop around, do your homework first so that you make sure that you are making a decision best for you. Now that leads to who can supervise me. And each university is very different. So you do want to make sure that you understand what the university rules are with this situation, because you're not always restricted to just your supervisor. So there are no firm guidelines. There's a lot of flexibility for many, but you've got to be following the rules the university has. Now, technically speaking, a PhD supervisor should be a PhD holder, but this is not always the case. There is a thing called recognized non-academic experts. These are people that are prominent in your field, who have significant, impactful industry experience, who often make fantastic second supervisors, because their depth knowledge in industry, maybe, for example, you're doing, grounded theory approach or action research, and you really want that industry involvement. These people are so much better to guide you and support you than the average university professor. So you can look towards, outsiders who might not fit the typical academic guidelines, but who are actually extremely well respected. I remember from New Zealand, before I did my PhD actually, there is a gentleman called Dave Simmons, and he was the leading expert in New Zealand on not Maori culture, but I guess Maori family history. And I went to some lectures by him, and he has no notes. He just stands up and he talks and talks and talks. And he can tell you every single family history of the Maori population in New Zealand, where they came from, who they were associated with, what they did, what happened to them, so much stuff. He didn't even have a bachelor's degree, but he ran a section of the biggest museum in New Zealand, and he actively supervised students because the knowledge up here was far greater than the academic qualifications that the university people had. So don't just limit yourself. Look at where you can get people. And if your university says, you know what, I'm not comfortable with that, always remember that you can have as many people as mentors as you like. So even though they may not supervise you, they may be the people that you turn to the most for guidance, for advice, even just to play devil's advocate, so that they can keep questioning you, so that you develop further. Now, there are two types of supervisors that you will get. The first one is your primary supervisor. Now, that's the person who is administratively responsible for what you do. So this is likely to be a lecturer from within your university department. They may not be 100% the best subject matter expert for you, but they will process everything with the university. So they will help you with your ethics applications. They will guide you through funding opportunities. They'll step you through preparation for defending your proposal, defending your thesis or dissertation at the Viva, and so forth. But they can also be, the best situation is they are also a subject matter expert, but there's some scope there. Your secondary or joint supervisor might be lecturers from another department or even from other universities. And sometimes you can actually get retired professors who will happily supervise you. And the university will, of course, send them a little bit of money once a year. Now, I have a couple of friends who have retired, but they still supervise students because of their expertise, and the universities are very happy for them to do so. So that really gives you, an overview of who you're going to get. Now, let's look at how many supervisors is too many, or really how many supervisors is just right for this case. Now, I've got 4 key points here: policy, practicality, purpose, and hierarchy. Policy comes down to how many supervisors does your university expect? Some universities say maximum 2. Some universities will say up to 5. Now that's fine. Look at what your university says, then move to the next point, practicality. Imagine you have 5 supervisors. Each of your supervisors gives you different feedback on the same piece of work. It is going to drive you crazy. So you've got to think about what is manageable for you. I know some students say, look, I want 3 or 4 supervisors because I want to get their knowledge. That's great. But that leads us to the third one, purpose. What is the role or the contribution from each of the supervisor we want? You know, some supervisors we might want only to help us at the methodology stage. So that's great. You know, when I'm doing my methodology and I'm working it through and I'm trying to refine it, I'm going to rely on that supervisor the most. And the other supervisors, I'm not going to have too much interaction with. But sometimes I may need all of their input. So you have to decide for yourself what is most effective, but also you have to understand for yourself, what do you want? What do you require out of each supervisor? And again, I want to come back to it's your PhD, drive it. So you've got to be able to say, look, you know, Dr. Craig, really, I see you helping me with my methodology. I see you helping me with my analysis. Can I count on your full attention at that time? Maybe I'm going to go to somebody else and say, right, I need your help with navigating the university system. I want to apply for research grants. I want to get funding. Can you specifically help me with that? Or maybe somebody, look, I'm new to this discipline, and that's acceptable, by the way. I need to have a little bit of guidance into how to quickly make sure that I fully understand the landscape of my subdiscipline, of this niche. And that's something that another person may give. So really do think about their purpose. And finally, the most important thing is to think about their hierarchy. Now, this is not whether they are professor, associate professor, senior lecturer, lecturer. This is about if you have 3 supervisors, who is the one that you want to work with every day? i.e., who is your primary supervisor? And then how do you prioritize the others? And if you have 3 supervisors and you say each are equally important, 2 of those supervisors are wrong for you. So it's very important that you can think through how they will work. And more importantly, I've got my 3 supervisors. I send off a draft chapter and they give me feedback. Which one would I listen to first? Which one has the biggest impact in my decision making? That's extremely important as well. So where do I find these potential supervisors? You know, I don't go down to Tesco or Carrefour or whatever and pick them off the shelf. And sometimes I'm not even going into the university necessarily, because I might be looking further afield than the city that I live in. So I'm going to talk about where we can get information about potential supervisors and how we can make use of that. First, many of us actually go for lecturers that we've already worked with or that we know, people that we know. Now that's our own experience, that's great. But my advice is you do not want to have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a PhD from the same university. Some people say, but it's convenient. Absolutely, very convenient. The big problem is it does not show academic development. It does not show exposure to different types of thinking. And a person who is stuck in the same university for all 3 degrees is less attractive to an employer, be that academic, you know, another university, or industry. they are less attractive to a future employer because they do not have exposure. So I purposely tried to get in my career different universities in order to showcase those different experiences, the different people that I looked at. So that's just a piece of advice. But regardless what the situation is, you may still know a person, and that may be ideal for your personal circumstances. I look around at other instructors, colleagues, alumni, former students, and I ask, hey, look, I want to do some research on this. Who are the names that you think I should speak to? So I do ask around, and I'll even ask existing lecturers, people that I've done my master's with, I want to do this. Who do you think, whether it be in Indonesia, whether it be in the region, or whether it be globally, who do you think are the people I should approach? You want to start looking at university websites, the departmental sites, personal profile pages. Make sure you check out their publication records, because one, you want to see that they've got interests that are suitable or aligned to you. But also you want to make sure that they've not published the same research you hope to do, because you're about making a difference, doing something new. So it's important to see that. One of the things that I like about some countries is many universities will publish their lecturers or their professors' entire CV online. And that's great because that helps me see. So my master's supervisor was a guy from State University of New York. He was a professor of sociology, Frederick Deo. He had a 28-page CV. And what was so useful about that is not that I suffered looking at 28 pages, but his early research, which he put into there, gave me things to read. But it also reminded me that I have a quality supervisor that is really going to work well for me. Have a look, in addition, have a look at academic blogs. There are a lot of academic blogs around because academics not only publish in journals, but they publish for everybody else. You and me, the people who aren't their niche audience for their research. The 12 people who buy the journal from Elsevier and read that article. It's everybody else who is going to read. And this is where they talk about their research in easier language, more everyday language, but that gives a sense of what they are like as people, as well as going to be supervisors. So do look around. You find an academic blog that talks about some of the things that you want to research. That's the perfect person to approach and say, hey, can we have a chat about this? And because you've come from their blog, you've got that commonality. I was reading, your blog post on this, and it really does relate to some of the things that I'm hoping to understand more about. Can we set up a chat sometime? And that's a really nice and easy way to bridge that gap, a stranger approaching a lecturer, but because of the fact that they put their research out there for everybody, they obviously want people to engage with them, to appreciate the research that they've done. Do have a look on LinkedIn. If you're not on LinkedIn, that is the biggest mistake imaginable. I strongly advise creating even the briefest of LinkedIn profiles to get you started. A lot of academics globally are on LinkedIn. They share a lot, but it's also a very easy way to connect with people. And shortly, I'm going to talk about how do we approach these people? How do we approach these potential supervisors? Many of them look like they're difficult to approach. So having a LinkedIn profile, being able to connect through there, being able to let them see a little bit about you first, is actually a great icebreaker in a way. And it's a great way to be able to touch base without it being too serious, without there being too many expectations. In terms of where else to look at textbooks, articles, publications. And I say here, who is hot? At the moment, in the last 6 months, or we'll give it 12 months since we're in a pandemic, in the last 12 months, who are the big authors, the ones that are worth exploring, and who, not only who they are, but who do they cite in their articles? Because that will give you a nice community of like-minded research types, like-minded individuals that you can then go and approach and see if they work. Now, let's get out of the textbook side of things. There are a lot of research databases around. So CiteSeerX is one, Google Scholar, Find a PhD database, all are searchable via disciplines, sub-disciplines, topics that can help you think, okay, these are some people. Now, you don't have to approach them. You know, you've got your own filters. Are they close enough? It might be, look, do they even communicate in the language that I am comfortable communicating in? So there'll be many things, but use that as a way of creating a list, because you're not going to create a list of 2 people and then pin all of your hopes on those 2 people. You're going to have a list of 10, 20, maybe more that you're going to look through and you're going, okay, these are my priority. And then as you start talking to them, who responds? Who shows interest? Who says, sorry, going on sabbatical for 2 years, don't want a student? So, it's going to help you by having that bigger list. Also look at recently submitted dissertations in your proposed field. So whoever in the last year has submitted a dissertation that has close relationships to your niche, look at who was the supervisor for that. Okay, you don't want somebody necessarily who graduated last year being your supervisor, although that's actually a possibility, okay? So keep that in mind. But you want to look at who supervised these people, and maybe you can talk to them. And also, you've got that bridge, because the person who wrote the dissertation, especially with it being new, is very likely to be very happy to talk to you. And they will also be a way of introducing you to their supervisor so that you get a better chance of having that conversation. Now, out of all of this, that's a series of ideas of where you can find out about potential supervisors. But I'm going to say there's one more thing that I really like. And as funny as it sounds, it is YouTube. Okay? When you have a list of potential supervisors that you've searched elsewhere, a CV is wonderful, but a CV doesn't tell you what their personality is like. A CV tells you what they achieved, where they worked, and how much funding they got. YouTube, where you get to see them present, maybe they're doing a news article, maybe they're doing a conference presentation, maybe they've just put up a public lecture like I do sometimes. But you know what? You get to see their presentation style, and you get to say, oh yeah, I like that person. Or, worst case, it's like, no, thank you, keep them away from me, because you're not comfortable. But that helps you in that decision process. And that's really important. And also, those who put themselves up on YouTube, for example, are more likely to respond to your requests than those who are not available in such an easy way or an easy manner. Now, there are a few criteria that you need to think of. Now, remember before I said, this is a little bit like a job interview. So in terms of it being like a job interview, you need to make sure that you set some criteria, what you want out of them, because you have the, I guess, the obligation, but you certainly get to work with these people for the next 3 to 5 years. So kind of when I said it's like a marriage, you are going to have a very close relationship. So there's a few things that I think are important to look at. First, look at their own research journey. The supervisor, did they have international exposure? Who do they work with when they write journal articles or other publications? Which universities have they worked at? So if, for example, they studied their bachelor's, master's, and PhD at the same university and then got a job at that university, that's not going to be helpful for you. So look at that and use that to help shape your decisions. Look at their communications when you write to them, when you might phone them up. What's the tone like? How frequently do they communicate? What sort of style? What sort of manner? Do they make time for you, or do they sort of try to push it and push it and push it and push it, and you feel like you're not going to get along? Are they in the media? And this is an important one. Do media houses, whether it be newspapers, radio, television, do they quote them in articles or opinion pieces? That's going to tell you about their personality, but it's also going to tell you about how the rest of the world sees them. If the media don't ask, for their input in things that relate to what you're researching, then chances are, as a researcher, there will be stronger ones out there. Look at their area of expertise, okay? It should be related, it needs to be relevant, maybe some parallels. Do they have a compatible methodology to you? So if you were to come and say, hey, Craig, can you supervise me in this? I want to do a quantitative study. I'm going to say, go away, because I am not a quantitative researcher. And there's nothing I could do that I feel strong enough about that would help you to develop as a quantitative researcher. Now, we might get along as people, and I may be able to give you some advice, but I wouldn't make the right supervisor. So you really do need to make sure that your supervisor is comfortable with the type of methodology that you are comfortable with as well. That doesn't mean they have to use it all the time, but they have to be knowledgeable about it. So coming to me and saying, well, I want to do a quantitative study, I don't have that skill. I can help you with basic first-year statistics. I can do a few calculations, but I'm not going to be able to go deep enough so that you can really analyze confidently and present based on that. So look at that. You want to make sure the person is available. Now, this is very important. This is a 3 to 5 year relationship. So if they are going to change university next year, or they are going to go on sabbatical, that's important for you to know. When I finally got down to doing my doctorate, in the first meeting I had with the supervisor that I selected, he actually said to me, Craig, in 2 years, I'm taking a 6-month sabbatical and I will be going to Australia. And at the time, I'm like, so what? This is now that we've got 2 years to get through. But what I realized was the time that his sabbatical was going to be is my data analysis phase and my writing phase. And that's the time that I need my supervisor more than ever. So it's not about saying, okay, I'm not doing it. It's about understanding their timeframes. And also you have 2 years to work together to plan what will be the arrangements now that you know this person's going away. And back when I did my PhD work, we didn't have Zoom. We had emails, which people did not read from home. So it's not an on-24 scenario where I can jump onto a Zoom call. You can have my writing in front of you and vice versa, and I can give you real-time feedback, draw all over the screen, and give you honest feedback. That wasn't the case back then. So, make sure about their availability. Make sure that their personal style and personality complements yours. You don't want somebody that you're scared of. You don't want somebody who's, oh yeah, it's okay. This looks really good. Somebody who's too relaxed. If they're too relaxed, it may not help you. So make sure you get, like choosing friends, like choosing a partner for life, make sure you get that, that comfortable zone between them. They need to be prepared to work with you. So make sure that they're comfortable with you as well. And also make sure that they're comfortable with other supervisors that you might want. So even though you've found 3 brilliant supervisors who all like you, you've got to make sure that they're okay with each other. So there are some academics, there are some lecturers I would never want to work with. And everybody I know in the academic world also has the, I won't work with this person, or I won't work with this person. So you've got a lot of multiple scenarios to think about. Okay, a few additional criteria that's important is how much supervisory experience have they? If you are their first PhD student, it's not going to be that it's a bad thing, but you've got to be very comfortable with them, and you've got to also make sure that you can trust the others on your panel. For me, I think the best scenario is your primary supervisor should have successfully supervised at least 3 other PhD students through to completion. Not, I supervised, 3 dropped out. They completed and they submitted. Look at other students that they have supervised, get some feedback from them, talk to them as well. How was your experience with this professor? Did that work? Look at what their current research interests are, obviously. Also think about the fact, do they have the freedom to work? Are they open, do they give you the freedom to work? So are they open to new ideas, ways to explore, so that you can grow your research as your direction? So remember I said, you drive it. You don't want a supervisor that says, look, I only want you to use this methodology because I've been using it for 10 years. Your contribution to what you are doing is taking that methodology further and maybe pushing those boundaries. So you're going to want to make sure that they are happy for you to do it in such a way. Make sure that they're time conscious, aware of things. It's not like, hey, can I have a meeting this week with you? And 3 months later, they reply and say, oh, I'm sorry, I've been busy. We can talk in 2 weeks' time. So they've got to be aware of your timeframes and be able to accommodate that as well. You want to make sure that they can help you after your PhD so that they can introduce you to people for jobs, for research positions, anything like that. And you want to make sure that they can introduce you to their social network of other academics so that you get to find new opportunities for collaboration. As you go through the PhD, you will be publishing. Some of that, probably all of it, will be co-authored work, not only with your supervisor, but perhaps with others as well. So in that case, make sure they are willing to introduce you to others. And that's really helpful. That says a lot about their personality. You need to care about their reputation. And the most important thing I'm going to argue is that they can take a stand for you. So if you find yourself in a challenging situation, that they are willing to stand up and believe in you and support you even if you screwed something up. That's extremely important. Now, I just want to move on to the last bit before we go for a Q&A. The qualities of a good supervisor. So as we are looking, as we are trying to identify who's good, the things that we want to look for, are they friendly and approachable? You know, are they available for you? And the measurement, the metric for this is, was the first meeting with them easy to schedule? If it was so difficult to get a time with this person, you're really going to be in for 3 to 5 years of extreme challenge. Are you inspired by the work they do? Are they enthusiastic about your topic? You know, do they look and say, oh, that's a nice topic? Or do they really start right from the beginning, sharing ideas and asking questions and really trying to get to know your research as well as yourself? You know, do they have a similar working style for you? So back when I was finishing my master's, I had a very good supervisor from National University of Singapore. And he is now the world's #1 economic geographer. And he's a really nice guy. If you look him up, he's also the guy who got in trouble for driving the Lamborghini down the wrong side of the road in Singapore and causing a crash. University in Singapore pays well. But back to him. Henry was a really nice guy. He was very helpful. And we were talking about me going to Singapore to do my PhD as a continuation. And we had a meeting one day and he said, oh, I need you to write 4 publishable articles every year. And that just frightened me. I'm like, no. And it actually put me off. Even though, yeah, it's kind of not an unreasonable expectation. I have friends who do easily 4 a year at the moment in the same position. But it did put me off, and I felt that the working style was going to be too intense in comparison to my personality. So it's really good to sort of get a stance on how they work. Leo, who ended up actually supervising me, sat with me very early on and said, you know, I will always be there to support you and I will always read your work and help. But please do not make grammar or spelling mistakes. I'm very pedantic about this. It must be perfect. And that also scared me, but less so because I figured, you know, I can get a little bit of help with that. But that's to do with working procedures. It's about expectations. And you've got to make sure that you're comfortable with their expectations as well. Things to look for is, you know, that they're not going to leave the university or go on the sabbatical, as I talked about. They have strong connections that you can tap into. They're up to date with their knowledge. But coming back to 4 things that are important, choose a supervisor who excites you. Don't choose one because they're convenient. Choose one that you want to work with because you know that you will be a better researcher because of it. Personal chemistry, and I'm calling it gut instinct, is very important. The first time you meet someone, if you don't feel good about them, use that knowledge because you've really got to make sure that you can work with this person. You want to make sure that you can align expectations. So this is about you also being honest with them. It's about you telling them what are the speed bumps that you are likely to face and what are the issues they need and how this all comes together. And, you know, it also includes, look, I want to have a monthly meeting with you. I want you to give me feedback like this. Tell them how you work best. This is not about them saying, yeah, I'm happy to supervise you. This is about, look, I work night times. This is me, by the way. I work night times. I work very piecemeal. I don't need to meet a lot, but if we meet, I just want to go through a whole lot of things. Get your verbal feedback is fine for me. And then I move on. Now that's how I work. Now I need to communicate that to a potential supervisor so that we all know that we can help each other. If you tell me, oh, Craig, I'd love you to be my supervisor. I really need written feedback every 2 weeks on what I produce. Yeah, I'm not going to be the right supervisor for you either, simply because that's not how I work. So there has to be that meeting of expectations as well. And finally, you want to see how well they can train you in methodology, because understanding the methodology is very important, but you want to make sure that they are going to be able to help you develop. Now, I believe the PhD journey is based on two most important things. The first one is about communicating research to different people. That's the first part. The second part is about being able to innovate and evolve methodology to create stronger research. And that's where I think the supervisor should come in first and foremost, is to help build your competency in methodology.
Right.
Now, the last part I want to get into is to talk about how we approach our potential supervisors. So I'm just going to give some very generic advice for now. Your first contact is, of course, the most important. You have to make a good first impression. So usually it will be an email, much like a job application. So make sure, make it a strong one, make it a positive one. Don't make it a demanding one. And most important, don't make it vague. They need to know who you are and what you want before they can reply to you. Most likely, you probably want to send a CV. So make sure you've got a nice, clean CV that's up to date. Now, a bit of advice here. Many of us probably don't put a lot of effort into the visual design of our documents, especially our CVs. It's the first thing I look at. If your CV looks like you quickly typed it while you were drunk last night, I'm not replying to you, simply because I want students who have attention to detail. If you have spelling mistakes, if you have layout issues that make it look terrible, you're not demonstrating the ability of a careful researcher. So for me, that's actually a factor that would put me off a student. You also should have a one-pager ready. You don't have to know everything about where you want to head, but a little one-page outline that talks about the key problem you see, 2 or 3 pieces of the literature that are guiding you towards that, the methodology that you think today is appropriate. It may change. And the time frame and the resources will help them to understand that you've been thinking about this, that you're going, in the right direction. You can meet potential supervisors at conferences. This is like a conference in a way. There are opportunities. Get introductions from others as well. Like it or not, from today onwards, you have to spend time networking. And although you're going to get ignored a lot, you still have to make that effort. And what I find is, a lot of us try to email someone, but that can easily get lost in the universe. So look at other ways or other inroads we can get. So I look at LinkedIn. I look at social media as my last resort. If I want to get hold of a lecturer at a university and they haven't replied to my email, I phone up the departmental administrator. I just want to check, is Dr. So-and-so currently here? They might be on leave, they may be sick. As with the case of one professor last year, they may have died, but the university still puts their classes online. But by ringing the departmental administrator, 1, you can check that they're around. 2, you might be able to say, what's the best way to contact them? Or you can simply say, look, I sent them an email a couple of weeks ago. I haven't had a reply. Would you be able to help me follow up with them? And they'll probably just phone them up or send them a line and say, student X sent you an email, could you reply, please? And sometimes that's all that's needed, you know? Maybe they can't find it, whatever. But you need to find multiple ways of approaching the person. To get results, though, ultimately, you want to have a quality approach. Now, if we're doing this via email, there's a few simple pieces of advice. Always use their correct title. So professor versus doctor, okay? It's important to know, and it's important, at least until they tell you otherwise, to be quite formal about things. You know, dear so-and-so, kind regards, some form of formality rather than, hi, I want to talk to you about supervision. Some sort of formality, some sort of etiquette is very important. And that actually makes you stand out against all the others because it showcases you're taking the scenario seriously. Make sure you do your research on them. Speak knowledgeably about their publications, their field of study. Showcase that you understand a little bit about what they're doing currently so that you're building that bridge to them. Quite often, students will write, dear doctor, I'm looking to do a PhD in this. This is my thoughts. Can we schedule a conversation? The thing is, you've shown no interest in them. Why would they want to show interest in you? Okay, so it's really important that as you approach them, you are developing that relationship. Now, having said that, that means each email you send must be written for that person. Do not send a generic email to 30 different supervisors and hope that you're going to get, you know, a decent response. Pay attention to detail with grammar and spelling. Make sure formatting is good. Have a clear subject, you know, expression of interest, PhD research on whatever your topic is. Be brief, be clear, be concise. Also, take a little bit of time to outline your skills, knowledge, and academic background. So this is not only I did my master's degree in and I passed with, you know, an A- average. I'm
distinction.
skilled in qualitative research. I am skilled in personal interviews and have extensive experience undertaking documentary research. That gives us some very good information about you. And it also helps me to be able to say, oh, look, hey, you align. You know, this is similar to me. You know, explain why you want to work with them, not because, oh, look, you live down the road, this is easy, but your research inspires me. I've looked at this and I see that, you know, there's a spin-off that I can do. I want to work with you because of your reputation, because of the types of publication, because of your personal style. You can choose whatever, but link it to that as well. Then you can politely request for a meeting. Now, the great thing about this pandemic is we all use Zoom, and it's so much easier to have a simple meeting now electronically rather than having to travel. When I was first looking at my PhD, I lived in Auckland in New Zealand. The supervisor that I was interested in was actually in Christchurch. So although that's a 1-hour flight, it was also basically a 20-hour drive. So kind of a long distance. And I would fly down to meet them to have discussions because I prefer to do things face to face. So that's important. We just quickly move on to actually having a meeting and a few things to look at. You know, you've approached them, you've shared a little bit, you've managed to schedule a meeting. What you need to look for right at this moment is how easy is it for you to talk with them? So when you have a meeting, how do you feel about sitting in the same room, having a conversation? Do you feel threatened by them? Do you feel comfortable by them? Do you think they will motivate you? Do you feel scared or intimidated? all of this is going to help you think. You need to ask them some questions. The first question you must ask them, how do they support their research students? So what do they do for you? And this is why I say it's like a job interview. You know, they're meeting with you because they like your topic. You're meeting with them because you want to determine, are they the right people for you? So, you know, how do you support your research students? What can I expect you to do for me during my journey as a PhD candidate? How frequently do you like to meet your research students? Is this, you know, once a week, once a month, once a semester, once a year? And remember here, this is about negotiation. It's not, I should have a meeting every week or every fortnight. You've got to work on what works for you. So remember, you're in the driving seat. For me, I like to meet my supervisors in the past. Once every 6 months is more than enough for me. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not emailing them or communicating in other ways, because chances are I am. But I don't think I need to have a weekly meeting just to go through something that's not really going to help. So, you know, talk to them about what they like. How does that align with what you like? Also, you need to talk about any personal circumstances that might impact the way you work. So family commitments, you know, kids especially, remote working, business, other things that will disrupt. And the final thing, the final slide before we go to question and answer, because I know I talked a little bit longer than I thought I would, how to make the final decision. So my advice, talk to their other PhD candidates, those that are working with them. Did the supervisor offer to introduce them to you? That's always a really good sign. Look at, I call it the alternative calendar. The universities that I came from used to publish an alternative calendar, which was online feedback, or in that time, in my day, printed as a magazine feedback, but now online. Feedback on different lecturers, on different courses from the students. That's always really helpful for you. Find out how many successful students they have supervised. Make sure you look at the reputation of the university. I mean, you might find the greatest supervisor that ticks all of your boxes, but at the end of the day, if the university is not going to be recognized where you need it to be done, that's going to be a problem for you. And the final one is always, always, always look at the university guidelines, the policy on supervision, what they expect is the minimum and what they expect from you. So in terms of what I've done during that is try to share with you, how I look at finding a supervisor, what sort of things I need to know from them, more importantly, and how do I go about approaching them. I think now let's just open it up to a Q&A session, and I'll happily answer anything that you guys have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Craig. It's such a wonderful explanation about the tips and strategies on how to find the right supervisors. Let we have the chat box here. There is one question from Kartika. Dear Dr. Selby, thank you for your amazing advice for approaching potential supervisor. I'm wondering if we already contacted some potential supervisors, is there any time limit till we can conclude, okay, that's it. I think he is not interested with me.
I think if, you know, there's two things to this.
Mm.
First of all, if they haven't responded, you need to do a follow-up. They're busy people.
Yeah.
And let me ask you this. Do you answer every email that's sent to you? No. We all have lapses. We all forget some things, and fine. What I suggest is, look, you don't send an email today and then telephone tomorrow and say, I emailed you yesterday. Have you got an answer for me? My advice is On the first email, give it 10 days to 2 weeks. If you haven't got an answer from that, then I ring up the departmental administrator. I want to check that Dr. So-and-so is available. If they are, oh, could you help me follow up? I sent them an email, please. If that doesn't work, I'd probably do something through LinkedIn. But if they're at the university, okay, or they're working currently, and they haven't responded to you in about a month, I think it's a good idea to move on. Now, having said that, if you only approach one person and then you wait a month, you are not going to be a good student. So you should be approaching multiple people, having as many conversations as you can, and using that to decide. And, 2 months later, they come back to you and say, oh, I saw your email. I'm so sorry. You can reply and say, no worries. I found the perfect supervisor. Thank you so much for getting back to me. Goodbye. So, it works that way as well. But I think you need to be having multiple approaches at one time. And the worst case scenario, if you really have only identified one or two people you really want to talk about, and that happens, you've got to be able to find alternative inroads. So what I would do is, the departmental administrator is one. I would be looking for other graduate students in the department to give an introduction for you as well. It's not about being aggressive. It's simply about being smart and trying to get to these individuals. For the longest of time recently, a lot of us have been in lockdown. University academics, some still use desktop computers. So they may not even bother or have access to their usual email at home. So there's all sorts of things that can impact. I know for a fact, my email server does not like certain universities because I have a .asia email server. It means getting emails through sometimes is a challenge. Send from a second email account. If in doubt, just try again. But you've got to be a little bit smart. If you could find their email address, you can find their office phone number. You Google them, you can find a mobile phone number. Now, I don't suggest phoning them up on their mobile, but you can send a WhatsApp message or a Telegram message. And you can be polite and subtle and still get that back.
Based on your experience, Dr. Craig, how long did it take for you to find the right supervisors, and how many ignored you or neglected you at the time that you pursue your PhD journey?
I started a couple of journeys before I got onto the actual one I did.
I was just wondering.
It took me a while. The first time around, I wasn't confident with my subject. I was also working full-time teaching for a university, and I was very reluctant to reduce my hours because that meant I got less money. So I was very slow. When I finally got round to doing it, it took me about 3 months. That was because they were in a different part of the country. And in fact, I started with one in Auckland, and I moved to a second one, and he's like, well, you could just do it all here. And I ended up by transferring my enrollment. So it did take a bit of a journey from that. I think you should be looking at, from identifying the person to being at the stage to preliminarily enroll, you should be looking at about 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
If you take longer than that, I think they may lose interest as well.
Right. Okay, thank you. There's one person that raised their hand, Jan Bastian. Hello, how are you doing?
Hello, thank you, Professor. Thank you,
Hi.
Dr. Craig.
Yes, please, your question.
Yes, I have a little bit different question that I would like to ask, but I believe Dr. Craig is the relevant one, and I'm using this opportunity to address my question. My name is Jan, and I'm from Indonesia. and I'm currently studying at the Nicholas Copernicus University of Torun, Poland. But now I'm on my early stage, which is in my first semester. What should I do at this early stage to prepare my eligibility for further education, which is PhD? And I have a concern also about the funding. Most of my government in Indonesia provided the scholarship, which oblige me to at least return and live the whole life in my countries. What do you think is the possibility of me to get the different funding as compared of the currently I'm in European Union? Will that be okay? Would it be better for me to find another continent like your continent, Australia and New Zealand? Yeah, that's two questions of mine. Thank you.
Okay. Let's address funding first. And you're probably not going to like my answer very much because it's not going to be very helpful. I know very little about funding. I always self-funded. I never thought about the opportunity of a scholarship or anything like that. But having said that, funding is available the world over for candidates that show promise. So although you may have funding from Indonesia and bonded funding in terms of requiring you to come back for X number of years, not always a good thing, but funding's funding. Talk to the people at your university. I think you said Poland, very interesting choice, but talk to the people at your university. There are scholarships for international students the world over. There are places you can access external funding. If the university wants you, they'll find funding. And that's always been my experience. Yes, you'll probably be able to get access to a scholarship in Australia and New Zealand. That's a possibility. But will that give you the university experience that you want? You chose the current university for a reason. You're better off finding a solution to that. Or, I guess this is part of my upbringing, but negotiate. If you've got funding now, talk to them and say, okay, I want to cut down from 5 years to 3 years, but in those 3 years, I'll give you this. Always look at what you can do. Worst case, I would never recommend this if I was suggesting someone to study in Indonesia, but if you're heading to Europe, get a part-time job, very high minimum wage, you can actually self-fund off a part-time job, and I know lots of people that have. Now to your first question, which is what you can do to prepare.
To prepare, yeah.
It's very simple, Reed. You need to start developing a research proposal. You need to start knowing where you want to go. And the only way you can do that is really reading and learning as much as you can, extending your current level of knowledge. Show that you've made a start. Even if you're going to, sort of veer off a little bit later, showcase that you have made that start during the process.
Are you now in PhD programs, Mr. Yan?
Master degree. I'm taking master degree on tourism.
Planning, yeah? You're planning to continue.
So yeah. I'm going to suggest finish the master's degree first, because you want to get that spot on. And then, you're also going to determine, is that your springboard for your PhD, or you're going to do something a little bit different. Once you've identified that, there's nothing wrong with, at this stage, saying, I want to continue, because you're getting yourself extra time. That's fantastic. But, it really, as you'll have experienced with your master's, it's just a lot of reading. It is a lot of talking to people. The great thing these days is just dialing into a free webinar is always fantastic. And I do this all the time. I attend other people's webinars, learning so much because I want to continue growing, despite the fact that I've done this, quite a while. So those are how I would approach it. But put the priority on completing the master's and just sort of putting those feelers out there for what is going to be your next steps.
Right. University of Copernicus something I heard. This is
Yes.
new.
University of Nicholas Copernicus University. It is named after the astronomer.
Okay, right. That's interesting. Thank you, Masian. Now move on to the chat box. Wike Pratiwi ask questions. Dear Dr. Craig, thank you for your explanation. May I ask you one question? Based on your experience, what research that attract you?
I was always driven to, first of all, I'm driven by things that I saw around me. And you know, I call myself nosy. I like to know lots of things. So that's what drove me towards different things. I see something that I didn't think was right, or I didn't think the explanation was great, or I'm like, oh, that looks fun. And that was what actually got me into it. And you've got to have that trigger point. The trigger point gets you to a starting point where you say, okay, let me read about it. And I've had a few diversions along the years, things that interested me, but I never actually did anything with it. You know, I did a bit of reading. I'm like, oh yeah, that satisfied my knowledge. And then I move on to something else. But, you know, you're always going to find that there is a burning question. And I think those of us who come through to PhD and beyond, you know, you are going to see through just looking at around what's around in the world. You are going to see things that, you know what, I think that's my question. I think that's where I've got to handle. But from that, then you have to do the work, and then you have to actually refine it. I'm very skeptical of universities that say, oh, look, here's a research topic for you, go do it. Because when somebody else tells you what to research, you know, it's like a high school essay. But when someone else tells you what to research, your heart's not in it. Because your motivation, I think, is different. You may still survive, you may still do a good job, but I think unless it's, you know, something that's inside burning away at you, your motivation for it is going to be different.
Okay, so that's the answer for Miss Wike Pratiwi's question. So being nosy. Nosy itu kalau bahasa Indonesianya kepo.
Yeah, I'll just add one little thing. Don't always believe everybody else's answer.
Yeah, that's me as well. Yeah, I never trust any news, any data. Yeah, it can be created basically.
Exactly.
Okay? So be more skeptical person. Yeah, be critical person. So that's very important. And what you point out before that some universities, they choose the topic. I think it happened a lot in Indonesia, in universities in Indonesia. Yeah, so the supervisor that choose the topic for you to do the research.
Yeah,
and
it happens a lot in Malaysia.
Yeah.
I'm working with an Indonesian head of faculty to actually try and change that. We've got a few things on our agenda. One, to improve the attractiveness of qualitative research, but it's also to get students to find their own research topic.
Right. That's really interesting because that makes me until now haven't tried any effort yet to take my PhD, because I believe like it's some kind of, you know, the repeatable research that they do every year on and on without any significant result. Okay, move on to the next questions for Maria. Maria, dear Dr. Selby, thank you for your wonderful explanation and useful tips. I would like to ask about personal research roadmap. How important is it to attract the supervisor?
I think, sorry, so more to the question.
Yeah, create a personal research roadmap. And how important is it to attract the supervisor?
Okay. The roadmap is, I prefer to use the word scaffold or scaffolding rather than roadmap, because roadmap suggests we must follow the path. Scaffolding gives us a structure that we can work within. And, you know, even if today we write our research proposal, 6 months later, we are going to have it adjusted. It continuously changes, not major changes, but it navigates differently. So it is good to map out what you consider the milestones, what you feel will contribute to the milestones that are most important, and to help you on that. But don't treat it too much as a roadmap, whereas there's only one road for you, because you are going to either have to change road or get out of the bus and hop onto a bike or something like that. In terms of the supervisor, most academics will tell you the supervisor's essential, but I still want to come back to that depends on your personality. If you've had a few years working experience, you've been around, you're sort of, a mature person, streetwise, whatever terms you want, you're not going to need the supervisor as much as somebody who hasn't gone to work, somebody who's been cocooned in their university previously. For me, the best thing was I started teaching way before my PhD. And the best advantage of that is that got me working with academics. It got me working with students. It got me working with business. So my understanding of things was a lot deeper. Yet I know people who literally bachelor's, master's, doctorate didn't move. And they needed more support from their supervisor. So look at your own personality first.
Right.
Regardless, choose a supervisor that you are comfortable with, because much like a workplace, you don't want to go into a workplace and you're always fighting with your boss. That's going to be a horrible experience. So you want to make sure you're comfortable with them. They are important, but you need to dictate, or you need to structure what support you require from them, because we're all different from that.
Right. Interesting. So basically you yourself that can really know what you need, from your supervisor.
Yeah. Just have to be honest to yourself about that.
Yep. Another question from Chitra. It is unethical if we contact some supervisors from the same university at the same time.
Is it unethical if I apply for 2 jobs at the same company at the same time?
No.
Right, there's your answer. You're feeling around to see who's right. You might end up by having both of them. I think the key thing to say is, look, I'm talking to a few different people. I want to see how we get along. I want to gauge your interest in my research. As much as they need to gauge whether you're suitable to be their student as well. But it's not unethical, it's perfectly fine. But I think, if you're a little bit open about it, I'm also talking to so-and-so, they can talk to each other as well. And they might be able to say, you know what, this is what I like, this is what I like, and give you better suggestions. So there's some value to that.
So it will be no problem at all.
Correct.
Right, guys. There are more questions. Probably you want to ask direct questions. If not, that I can conclude this webinar so we can finish earlier. But if probably some of you still have questions, we are still waiting for that, because as far as I know, all of the participants here are those who are willing to pursue their PhD journey. So I believe there are a lot of actually questions and something that they really want to know about this initial step to find the supervisor. Camelia, Hanani, yes, please. You may open your mic, please.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear my voice? Hi. Okay.
Yes.
First of all, thank you, Dr. Selby, for the sharing. It's very insightful. So I want to ask about my condition. I just got my bachelor's degree last year, July last year, and have been working as a research assistant ever since. So it has been almost a year. And I am currently considering to directly pursue a PhD without getting a master's degree. Do you think not having a master's degree is a major drawback that I need to address to my potential supervisor when I contact them? Or do you think
It's fine.
it is common for maybe students abroad to directly pursue a bachelor's degree, PhD, with just having a bachelor's degree? I think
That's all? Okay, that's all the questions.
That's a really interesting question, and I can't answer as you, but I can give some perspective on how I would think through the problem.
Mhm.
You know, if I'm started my master's and I want to upgrade, I know a lot of people who have done that, as there are people who have done a bachelor's with honors and gone straight into PhD. If you believe that you can complete the PhD, then fine. Nobody's going to look at the fact that you don't have a master's when you have a PhD. You know, nobody's going to look and say, oh, wow, you missed that important step. That's not relevant. What is relevant is a negotiated exit point. And what I mean by this is, and this works, and this is advice for everybody. It includes if you start a PhD but you don't finish it, okay? You want to have a negotiated exit point, which means in your case, you've started some stuff, you want to upgrade to a PhD. If for some reason you do not finish, I don't know what the reason is, but you don't get to finish, that you can walk out of the experience and still get a certification, which will usually mean a postgraduate diploma or master's. So that's why I say, you know, look, you're going to go up. If you don't meet the standards or if something happens and you stop, that you still walk away with a qualification. That's the thing, that's the risk, but that's also something you can negotiate with the university directly. I think, you know, I know of people who didn't do a master's, who did an honors degree, jumped straight into PhD, graduated perfectly fine, no problem. But it's about that safety net of if you have to drop out for any reason. And it also happens, you know, guys, as we're doing our PhD, maybe we come to our Viva stage and the supervisors say, look, the quality is not there. It's not ready. You're way off. You want to be able to say, well, look, can I trade it in for a master's? I've done this research. I've done this output. Can I get a master's degree and just leave? You want to have that option to walk away. So for Camellia, absolutely, if you feel you can do it and your university is comfortable, by all means, but just make sure there's that exit plan as a backup to help you, because it would be terrible to have a situation and then suddenly you get nothing at all from the whole experience. That would be the worst scenario.
So basically the answer is there's no problem on that, but you have to negotiate the exit position, yeah, just in case you cannot really deal with PhD life and, you know, probably your quality of your thesis is not really meeting the criteria of PhD, so you can still get the title of master's degree, either master's degree or postgraduate diploma. Yeah,
Absolutely.
so PhD is for those who haven't got the score for the thesis or something, right? I heard that because one of my students coming from France at the time I studied in the UK, she just got PhD instead of master's degree. Okay, thank you. That's the answer. Camelia, thank you. Now move on to Imade Sutayasa. You must from Bali.
Yes, thank you.
Yes,
first,
the question.
First, no, I don't want to be a wrong participant in this. I mean, it's a good webinar. I am one of a teacher in Bali. I'm a principal. I have a dream visiting English-speaking country like New Zealand, or Australia, or Singapore. And I am now 49 years old. I hope there is a chance for me. I'm graduate from the postgraduate in Unixa University. I took education administration, so was 7 years ago. I passed 2011. Sorry, now it's 10 years ago. So, do you have any idea, Mr. Greg? In my age is almost 50 years now, but I still have a dream to go abroad or try to get the education in English-speaking country. So first, is it possible for me? I'm a principal in elementary school, and I try to get the education in English-speaking country. I look in the field there is something that I have to learn, and of course, if I can and if I get a funding, then when I come back, I try to make any kind of creativity for our country, for Indonesian country. Like now in Indonesia, it's very lack for the supervisor. I mean that in elementary school in Bali, I'm a principal, but not effective. The supervisor supervise the principal or the school is not effective now. So that's why myself, I passed from the postgraduate 2011 in Unixa University. So how do I get the funding to get a PhD in English-speaking country like Singapore, Australia, or New Zealand?
Thank you,
Mr. Greg.
Thank you.
So
is there any chance for him, do you think?
okay, so I can't comment on funding because that's not an area I have great personal experience in. In terms of your own qualifications, first of all, your age, that is no concern. You can be 85 and universities will still happily take your money. So don't worry about that. I definitely encourage you to look at opportunities. There are online opportunities that might work really well for you. So the little surprise I put into my note, I'll be teaching a postgrad diploma. I'm finding it at the moment for an Indian university, is very much for people exactly like this gentleman who are in the industry, who want to upgrade, who want to take on new skills. And there are a lot of programs available. You can look at, for example, if I'll just give New Zealand as an example, you can do an online program as an international student at postgrad in educational leadership. There are a number of programs at universities, at polytechnics that you can get into. And I would say, perhaps have a look first at the online programs. Don't worry about your age because many of these are designed for people who have 10, 15 years experience. You and I are very similar in age. So I would hate to see a university tell me no because I'm too old. That will never happen. But yeah, go and explore. Scholarships, I can't comment about. I'd make my school do it, to be honest, but that's not my call. But definitely there's the opportunity. Knowing that when you look at most international programs, you are going to have to meet IELTS 6.0 as the basic requirement. So, I'm not sure whether that's something you've tested on, or whether you want to look at perhaps alternatives. For example, if you were to look at an alternative from Malaysia, all taught in English, but not necessarily the same entry requirement.
Right. So age is just a number, okay? Probably this would be a last
Thank
questions
you.
from the chat box. Thank you. So don't give up, Mr. Madea. From the
Thank you,
chat box,
Mr. Greg.
yeah, thank you. You're welcome.
I'm sorry. Do you have the email number, Mr. Greg?
Yeah,
We'll put that in the chat box for everyone.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Greg. Good
Cool.
luck.
We also have the slide presentation afterwards, and we're gonna spread to you all through the emails. Yeah. Last questions from the chat box from Mrs. Intan. Hi, Dr. Selby. Thank you for your insightful explanation. I'm a worker in state-owned enterprise in Indonesia, and I have already taken MBA in university in Indonesia. Now I'm still confused. Which one is better for me, to pursue PhD or to take the second master's degree, do you think? So I need your advice, please.
Okay, so MBA is quite special. MBA typically leads to a Doctor of Business Administration because of the way that it's structured. It's harder to jump from an MBA to a PhD. It's easy, of course, to jump from an MBA to an MA or MSc or whatever other master's degree. But you could look at doing a Doctor of Business Administration as the next stage, and maybe partway through that, transferring over, is my thinking on there. It comes down to a number of things. You know, only you can answer this question for yourself. It's about financing, it's about interests, it's about how much time you've got to commit. There's so many factors that come into it. The thing is, you're already in what sounds like a good job. So are you wanting to study to enhance your career prospects, or are you wanting to study for personal vanity? It's like, oh, I got a PhD, yay, this is good stuff. At the end of the day, go with what works best for you. Both are good. I met some students from India over the last 6 months. They're doing their third master's degree, and next year they're doing their first PhD. I've got a lot of respect for them because I try to do shortcuts on everything, and 2 master's degrees is a lot of work anyway. So either way is good, but just look at the pathways that meet your needs the most. And as I say, rather than looking at PhD directly, look at Doctor of Business Administration or DBA. Yes.
Okay, right. Doctor of Business Administration. I've just heard that. It's different with PhD?
It is different. It's same level. The focus is on action research and solving industry problems versus academic problems. So a Doctor of Business Administration is the logical next step from an MBA.
I see. Right.
The way in which it's a teaching based and then research. Research is very much focused on that. We'll call it on the job, but in industry problems that solved a different way. So you'll probably get a commercialization value out of it better than you will out of a PhD.
Because she's basically working in oil and gas company, in energy company in Indonesia called PT Pertamina. So probably this is something, very useful for her rather than taking.
If it's career oriented and not trying to find new formulations for oil and gas, I think, DBA would be next step.
It would be taking like 3-4 years as well?
Actually, you can do it in as little as 18 months, depending on the university.
Wow, but the title is Doctor of Business Administration.
Correct.
Perfect.
And it's the equivalent of a PhD. People view it differently, but it is still a doctorate qualification.
Wow.
It's a terminal doctorate. So after that, it's sort of what it leads into might be a little bit differently, but you can still you can still look at PhD or other alternatives as well.
Right. Thank you very much. This is a new knowledge for me. Okay, right. Everyone, thank you for attending this webinar, this wonderful webinar with our special guest today, Dr. Craig J. Selby. Thank you very much, Dr. Craig, to have time for us. Let me wrap up a little bit about what you have explained to us. So finding a supervisor is something I could say like finding your soulmate, yeah, like finding your partner for marriage, for example. So it takes some time and it's kind of quite long journey for that. So be the best on this and be patient, basically do a lot of research. You yourself that really know what you want to do in the future, what you want to have in the future, and what you want to achieve in the future. So be firm on yourself first. Yeah, attend many seminars or webinars could probably help, but still the decision in on your hand. Right. I also have some notes that I have just dropped in the chat box, but we can get the slide presentation afterwards. After you finish filling up this satisfaction survey, admin, could you please cut paste to the chat box for this link? So yeah, thank you. So everyone can just copy and finish this link and can get the recording afterwards. Thank you so much. That's the email from Mr. Selby, Craig at thethirddegree.asia. So you can reach him out there, and probably we can conduct another workshop or another webinars, Mr. Selby, collaborate between TransforMe and your company, the Third Degree. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. And what else? Anything that I missed something? I think everything is up, yeah? So thank you so much, everyone. I'll see you again sometimes in the future. Bye. Thank you, Dr. Craig.
Here, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good luck with the journey.
Thank you.